Okay, thank you for getting back promptly after the talk. It's a hard act for the afternoon people to follow, so we feel sorry for them a little bit, but they're AT&T people, so they have thick skins. So we have one more polling question here. Now, we've been through it today, and I said there's been some substantial differences, so we kind of like, along with feedback that you fill out, but maybe on this polling question is give us your thoughts. So, for next year, should we have more talks that are 20 minutes each, or fewer talks that go into more depth, 30 to 40 minutes, more vendor talks, we had a couple, or keep it about the same. So you can text 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D to 56418. So it'll be interesting because I said we had a... Oh. Is this a fake one here? Okay. Well, I'll keep talking a little bit. Well, so that's good. I'm glad people liked it. So, all right, great. All right, so we have several more talks, but really two sets. So we have Patrick McCanna doing another 20-minute talk, and then we have a series of short talks, a 10-minute, and then several 5-minute talks. So it's kind of a rapid-fire end where we'll wind down. So next talk is Patrick McCanna from AT&T. Patrick is a lead member of technical staff in AT&T's Security Enablement Organization. He leads several security efforts affecting AT&T's portfolio of mobile devices. He likes Python, Android, and short message service centers. Now it gets a little strange, but I'm going to keep going, Patrick. Prior to joining AT&T, Patrick built software for airplane cockpits at Honeywell. He joined a Halloween-themed startup, buycostumes.com, and worked at Microsoft Xbox Live, so quite a varied background. He has a BS in computer science with a mathematics minor from Linfield College. So, Patrick, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gus. So I don't really feel bad about coming after Ed's presentation. I thought that was awesome. I hope you guys found it really compelling. Kind of bumps me up nicely. My goal today is my slides are titled Mobility Security Incidents and Trends. I'm going to talk to you about 3 stories that you may have been reading about in the press over the last 3 years involving attacks against mobile devices and, in some instances, AT&T's network. I want you to walk away with an understanding of what we do behind the scenes when those events take place, get an understanding of how we move to evolve the network. And then I'm also going to go over the last 13 years in a really, really fast fashion of threats against handsets. And what I have taken away even building this slide deck, having been doing this for mobile security now for about 6 years, but security for 10 years, the last 3 years have been amazing. The rate of improvement and quality in mobile security research has significantly skyrocketed. And so if you're in an enterprise role making decisions about mobile security, if you're a consumer thinking about mobile security, I hope you probably have applied a level of skepticism about these talks of the mobile apocalypse. Things are getting really real, and we're working very hard behind the scenes to make sure that we protect the network and we protect our subscribers and give you guys tools to be able to protect yourselves. So for starters, I am Patrick McCanna, Patrick.McCanna at AT&T, 2 C's, 2 A's, 2 N's in that order. I'm very open to being contacted, so if you have some concern about mobile security technologies or where we're going as a company, feel free to send me an email, and I can't guarantee we will respond to everything, but we'll try to get it built into our efforts. The Security Enablement Organization, a couple of years ago, Ed made a decision to improve the investment in security for mobile technologies. And so we have an interesting challenge. Carriers acquire and implement technology a lot more than we develop it. And so when you have security events that can kind of be sourced as design errors versus implementation errors, we're really well positioned to deal with implementation issues, and we can build our processes in such a way so that we don't put products into the network that are likely to get tipped over tomorrow. When we're acquiring technologies from developers and vendors, it's a little bit more difficult to enforce design security considerations. So we work hard to develop processes and requirements that push our vendors to build more and more secure products. So SEO is the organization I work for, and it looks like I'm accelerating through my slides. So I want you to imagine that you wake up one day and you read some articles in your RSS feeds. First, for starters, you can see that it seems like it's possible to spoof MMS messages. You also may read an article about attacking a cell phone with an SMS message and getting exploitable code on there, or executable code. You might be reading an article about ways to spy on subscribers using weird messaging techniques. And the first question you might say is, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I'm going to die. The second question you might be asking is, what's going on behind the scenes at AT&T? So we don't publicize this. Our first step in general is researcher outreach. We like researchers. They're very smart people. They provide a valuable role in the ecosystem for our industry. So we do work directly with the researchers wherever possible to get insight into what their attacks do and also work on behind the scenes to see if there's something that maybe they haven't considered. Exploring the exploits. So to researchers, mobile networks are really a very big black box. And in general, they only have one cell phone for one carrier. So they may make a discovery, but they don't necessarily have insight into why the attack works. They just know that it does. And you'll see from time to time they'll make statements about how this attack works across the industry. But what we've discovered over time is that, in fact, some of these exploits are carrier specific. And so we kind of have to look at these things and make sure, are these statements true? Are there implications that they haven't thought of? And what can we be doing to deal with those issues? So in terms of dealing with these issues, we kind of have a three-phase attack. We evaluate mechanisms for detecting exploits. We evaluate mechanisms for preventing the exploits in the network. Sorry, guys. And we evaluate the applicability of patching handsets. I don't want to spend too much time, but I do want to say that the patching component is a point of discussion in the security industry. We know patching well in handsets, or I'm sorry, in laptops. But what we found is patching on handsets is a difficult procedure. Does anybody else have app stores where they get excited when they see they've got 20 updates and they can't wait to apply them? Do you get excited when that update tells you you have to tether your handset to a PC before you can apply the update? This is the area the industry wants to go, but the reality is this is a very clumsy way of addressing those issues. And so I want to point out that that's an area we do go when we have to, but really not our first choice. So in the instance of the first exploit, we had some stories that came out around Black Hat Las Vegas in 2008, I think, where we had researcher Zane Lackey, he used to be a consultant at ISEC Partners. He's now responsible for security at Etsy.com. So if you want to buy a hat, Zane will benefit from that. Luis Miras is an independent security researcher. He's a little bit more camera shy, so he just sent me that avatar. They had found a way to send multimedia messages that were not authenticated in such a way so that you had validation that the sender was who, in fact, they were claiming. I missed an awesome opportunity to have my boss send Ed lots of MMS messages saying how great I was. But unfortunately, I think he would have seen that my manager is unlikely to send MMS messages heralding my praise. So in this particular instance, they came to us with some claims, and we evaluated them. We asked them if we could run some management tools, some monitoring tools, while they demonstrated their attack. And we were able to see some parameters about how that stuff works behind the scene. In Brian Rexroad's presentation earlier, he alluded to some of the complexities involving SS7 filtration and monitoring. And really, some of our experience here was really well-founded. We initially made some changes that mitigated a significant amount of the attack traffic that could have come from an attack like this. But what we found is that some areas that seemed like optimal choices for doing the filtering did not scale when we made some changes. And so we actually had to work with our SMSC vendors to request a functional change. And so if you think like, IP security, network security, this is really well understood. Why can't you just put an intrusion prevention system and a firewall in and blah, 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 blah. The reason is fundamentally, SS7 is not an IP network. And so we need to work with the vendors that play in this infrastructure to develop technologies that do this kind of stuff. The nice thing is that I'm happy to report it took us a while, but as of this spring, we think we've pretty much mitigated all of the possible derivatives of their attacks. So the next one, Charlie Miller, he's kind of the rock star of the research community. He wins all of these CanSec West pwn-to-own competitions. They give him prizes if you can hack a device that's got the latest and greatest patches on it. You can win the device. You win a cash reward in some instances. My joke about Charlie is the reason he keeps winning is because everybody that's smarter than him has realized they can make way more money doing it on the black market. So Charlie, he demonstrated the first proof of concept remote code execution vulnerability on the iPhone. We didn't really have the heads-up notice that we did with the SMS or the MMS spoofing. So we talked to him at Black Hat and did the same exact thing, ran traces while he was running his attacks. A couple of things I want to point out. So in his discussions, it kind of looked like there was this remote code execution vulnerability on the handset as a whole. And what Charlie did is he actually wrote a contrived application with an exploit or a vulnerability purposely built into it. So when he ran his attacks, he kind of, I'm not going to say he stacked the deck, but he was demonstrating that this concept was possible. With the way that attack worked, it didn't really make sense to build some kind of filter in the network because really you need to identify vulnerable applications first and the signature associated with them. So if it was something more specific to like messaging, for example, then that would make a lot of sense. But he did work on a denial of service attack, and he had to send 500 text messages to manipulate the stack so that the device was just vulnerable enough. We looked at how we would do some monitoring for that, and there were other tools that would make it obvious that these attacks were happening. He didn't release the actual code for that particular attack, so we didn't really need to develop filters around that. The big thing that we did in that instance is working with the vendor or the partner to get patches out. We did a campaign of mailing to the customers. We sent text messages, letting them know, hey, there's a patch. It requires tethering your device. You really should apply it. So in that scenario, not so technical, but a little bit more procedural. But we were, I think, ahead of the curve on it. The last instance, Don Bailey and Nick DiPetrillo. Don Bailey also at ISEC Partners. Nick DiPetrillo is at Harris Corporation. They found some attacks that you might have read about called, we found Carmen Sandiego. And they found some messaging techniques to locate the physical region of someone if you knew their MSDN, their phone number. And they reached out to us and said, well, we're doing this research and we're finding this thing, but and this is going to sound like I'm pushing for how awesome we are. It doesn't seem to work on your network, and we were wondering if you know why. So we talked with them and did some research and asked them again to help us, allow us to put some traces on and capture this traffic to see what was going on. What we found is that there was a design decision that was made many years ago that prevented this. We abstract what's called a mobile switching center from external entities. Some carriers allow external entities to query mobile switching centers. Just a design decision. There are some reasons to do this for performance. Carriers in general have long thought that the SS7 network is a trusted network and we can trust everybody to play by the rules. Don and Nick have demonstrated that that's probably not a good operating procedure going forward. So long and the short of it, we looked at this research. We found some scenarios that we thought might be possible that they hadn't considered. We made some changes, upgraded the network, and then we worked with the GSMA security group to allow other GSM carriers access to these guys to get an understanding of what they might be doing wrong or how they might identify the attacks. So this is just my security capability maturity model. Hopefully everyone in the room is familiar with it. If you're not, if you're doing security work, this is something that you should look into at least for an hour or two. Learn lessons, apply lessons. So this is everything that we do here. Our role, we have requirements gathering and a definition responsibility for the mobile network. So when we see these kinds of vulnerabilities, we try to change our requirements and fix the network for the future. So I have 8 minutes. If you guys have questions, you should feel totally free to interrupt, particularly about any of the research scenarios. I'm going to talk about the last 13 years. I've worked in security for about 10 years now, 1999. I started doing mobile security in 2004. So I came very much from an IP world into the mobile world, and I found that I had to learn a whole new taxonomy. So some of these things might be a little bit unclear. So just feel free to pop in. Thematically, starting in 1998, going to 2004, the big security threat for mobile devices and mobile networks was spam. So that was 6 years of awesome, peaceful, boring bliss. Starting in 2005, we started to see bluejacking exploits, which you might have read and trashy UK news articles about being able to set up a random encounter on the train with somebody else who had Bluetooth set up on their phone and you could chat. Some people didn't put password controls on there, so you could grab their entire contact list and steal pictures off the phones. Generally, these were configuration errors. Nothing too terribly sophisticated. You had to be in the physical proximity of your victim. 2005, we start to see some viruses. There's this Bluetooth Kabir thing where it's moving from device to device to device, and you have to be in physical proximity to your victim. Really interesting part of this time, a lot of activity going on in Europe and Asia. Not so much going on in the United States. I've talked to a lot of people about this. I don't have a really good explanation for it. It's a really unusual situation. Moving forward into the latter half of 2005, we start to see MMS exploits. So attachments, again, that were a Trojan. They require user interaction. And once executed, they could do whatever an application could do. This scenario here, the Kabir and the ComWarrior, they tended to be more focused on Nokia devices. So one of the theories is that Nokia devices are far more popular in Europe and Asia than they ever were in the United States. Starting in 2007, we start to see this thing called WAP Push, which is a more sophisticated attack. It's a type of administrative message that, depending on what experts you talk to, it would be valid for a mobile-originated WAP Push message to go out. We looked at it, and we said, well, this doesn't seem very good. They said, well, it's really cool and powerful and enables all sorts of neat things. But what we found is you could throw videos onto anyone's phone and have it launch. So if you guys are familiar with Rickrolling, some of the guys in the security group, we had a great time making our phones suddenly spin up the Never Gonna Give You Up, Never Gonna Get You Down song, plus the video at any meeting we wanted. So the WAP Push scenario evolves, and we see the curse of silence attack. And this is an actual fuzzed SMS message. It comes from Colin Molnar, I believe. What this did is it turned Ericsson devices, Sony Ericsson devices, into a non-functional state. The device looked like it was working, but it couldn't send or receive phone calls. So the phone was effectively offline. So, all right, well, we started with spam, and then you had to be in regional proximity, and then messaging starts to do some weird things. In 2009, we see a lot more SMS fuzzing. So Colin Molnar worked with Charlie Miller at the Black Hat presentation, and he had some interesting exploits that only worked in Europe. He was able to take phones offline. He had an attack against Android devices. Tried to run them over here. In the United States, didn't work. Again, I don't want to sound jingoistic. I don't have a lot of explanations for it. Each carrier implements these standards in subtly different ways, and this has implications for how these attacks will work. So then we get to the MMS fuzzy spoofing. We also see, well, I mislabeled that. The last theme there is not spam, but it's supposed to be carrying on into messaging. In fact, this slide is not labeled properly. So we get into our messaging exploits, and we start to go into proxy hijacks. And what this is a man-in-the-middle attack. If you can allow someone to give you a proxy setting for your PC browser, and they control that proxy, they can look at all of your web traffic. This simple stuff, not complicated at all, but it sounds really scary when you do it on a handset. And so we started to see these scenarios where, hey, some people evaluated some techniques to get proxy settings changed on victim devices so they could see all the data that they were looking at. It was kind of interesting initially. That was just DNS traffic. But then they did go full-blown web proxies so they could see the entire flow. Oh, sorry, guys. We start to see the Carmen Sandiego network exploits. So this is actually interesting. Instead of involving attacking handsets, it's really about interrogating the handset. And so the analogy for me is that this is like port scanning activity. You're evaluating the footprint of the network, trying to find what devices are out there. Nothing that involved executing code on the device, but definitely interesting in the perspective of you're really starting to get into the guts of how the network works. And then at the end of 2010 and starting in 2011, we see these relatively sophisticated, and I'm not even going to say relatively, they are sophisticated attacks. Baseband exploits and browser-based exploits. So the baseband, this is kind of an area where for a long time it did not seem like that was going to be a high priority for us. But there's some tools that are out there, and there's some researchers that are high profile. They're doing really interesting work in this space. And so as a result, we've had to change our approach to baseband vendor selection, and we're starting to have more and more requirements for a mature, secure development lifecycle for someone who's doing something as seemingly innocuous as radio layer technology. The last thing I want to say about the RIM, Android, iPhone, browser-based exploits. So for a long time, the discussion has been there is so much fragmentation in the marketplace, we're really unlikely to see an event that sweeps across all portfolios. RIM, Android, iPhone are all building browsers based on WebKit. WebKit is an open standard. If you discover a vulnerability in WebKit, you only need to modify your exploit code for the target device. Not difficult to change your exploit code to go to different devices. So the thing that's interesting here is we're starting to see the possible scenarios where there are attacks that will not be limited just by the device manufacturer. And where I wanted to go thematically here, it's not real clear. When you started the slide, I had 6 years referenced in one of these boxes. And now we're getting multiple boxes in a single year. The rate is really significantly improving. The quality of the research is significantly improving. Things are getting more serious. So if you have been, like me, a little bit on the fence saying, gosh, mobile apocalypse, whatever, we're not at the apocalypse, but these threats are getting more real, and we do need to be taking them very seriously. So at the end, here's my conclusion slide. We do a lot of work behind the scenes. We work with the researchers. We love researchers. Researchers play an important part in the ecosystem. We make changes to our network to evolve against these threats, and we're very open to talking to folks. So with that, I'll put my name back up here, and I've got 30 seconds for questions. So,
do we have any questions for Patrick?
Why would AT&T hire their own researchers?
We do have researchers. In Gus's organization, they're doing some really interesting work. We've got proof of concept botnets. We've got folks that are developing exploits against, how do I put this? When we work with a partner whose product has not been released, we do get advanced instances of it. I know of instances where we've found attacks that have been prevented from getting into public code. Because of NDAs, nobody gets to know about these things. I'm not speaking abstractly. I'm not as smart as a lot of those guys, but I've found a couple of instances. So yeah, we do play in this space.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Excellent.